Welcome to the Amazing Authorities Podcast, where game changers, visionaries, and category leaders share how they built their brands, platforms, and global influence. Your host is Mitch Carson, international speaker, media strategist, and creator of the Instant Authority System. If you're ready to learn from those who've done it and want to become the go-to expert in your space, you're in the right place.
Marty Strong is in the house today. He is a former Navy SEAL, a retired Navy SEAL. He's also been a leader in business, a CEO currently, has had many leadership roles, and I don't think that's by accident with a name like Strong. I almost thought this must be a Hollywood stage name coming from LA. People change their names, but here he is, a CEO, a former naval officer, and a Navy SEAL with the last name of Strong. It just wouldn't work if it was Marty Week. So here you are, Marty. Thank you for coming to the Amazing Authorities podcast show.
Thanks for dredging up my childhood trauma. That was what everybody would call me, is Marty Week.
Are you sir? Oh my gosh. Well,
or actually they would call me Farty Week because they had to play on both of them. So
well, my first name is Mitch, and you can imagine what the B word was that followed when people used to tease me. But that's, I think we're grown men now, and probably doesn't happen, but on rare occasion. But I thought I would ask. Yeah, so this is a Strong name, literally and figuratively. And why did you become a SEAL?
Well, people that have seen my interviews or read my books know it was an accident, a mistake in orders. I actually went through boot camp, found out years later what happened. I went through boot camp and was brought to the pool to do some testing to see how fast I was, because we had a bunch of relay races to do. And part of the deal was I had to stay there and swim, but also do whatever else people that were controlling the pool told me to do, because they didn't want me to disrupt. It was me and like four of the guys. They didn't want us to disrupt their flow. So we did all that. And I go, from boot camp to air traffic control, radar school for 16, 17 weeks. And I graduate and I get my orders to a ship, or I think I'm getting my orders to a ship in the Mediterranean. And there are big snowstorms hitting the Great Lakes area. I got to get to the airport at O'Hare, and they hand me my orders, and they say, report no later than 07:30 tomorrow morning to underwater demolition SEAL training. And back then, I did not know what those letters meant.
Oh, my word.
Sure as heck wasn't the ship I was told I was going to. And that's what's kind of started the Odyssey. I showed up, and I thought I was going to try to talk my way into getting the right orders. And instead, a crusty old Vietnam vet SEAL Master Chief talked me into volunteering.
Now, did you go into the Navy right out of high school, or was it after college? Okay, so you were
right after high school, right after I turned 17, actually.
Geez, after 17. Okay, so your dad or mom had to sign off on for you to get in?
My mom did, yeah.
Okay, did she regret it later, or was it a good decision?
My mom was like a schizophrenic alcoholic. I don't think she realized she signed it. Matter of fact, I know she didn't know she signed it. So I don't think she realized I was in the Navy until maybe 10 years later. So
okay. Well, yeah. And was it what you expected?
Well, first of all, I didn't know what to expect. I was a big war movie buff, and I grew up with the TV show Combat, 12 O'Clock High, all those kinds of.
Oh, yes. I remember them well. Yeah.
And we all kind of wanted to be World War II guys, because that's what, was on the screen. So I understood, once I started the training, I understood what they did to some extent, but most of it was really classified back then. There weren't any books or movies. So, and then once you start getting into the selection process, you're not really thinking about a week ahead, let alone two days ahead. You're basically going from meal to meal trying to survive. It's kind of like a POW mentality. You're getting beaten up so much physically from it's just continuous exercise. It's just like a marathon that never ends. And so you end up getting fatigued, and then you get mentally fatigued, and then you start to wonder if you should be there or not be there. It's a volunteer program. You can quit anytime.
Right. Ring the bell.
And
I've seen in the
right.
movies. Okay.
Yeah, you ring the bell 3 times. And the so the way to survive it is to listen to that voice in your head and then just tell it to shut up and just put one foot in front of the other. So almost anybody that's ever been through any kind of special ops selection process will tell you you basically just had to put your head down and grind forward and ignore all the naysayers, the whiners, the people who are coming up with excuses, including the voices in your head telling you, hey, this would be a good excuse, or here's a disclaimer, you could quit right now and nobody would even know. So, and then all of a sudden one day you look up and it's graduation day.
So what was
6 months
harder,
later.
the mental challenge or the physical challenge? Because you were just a young pup at that time.
In the moment, it was absolutely all the physical because I didn't understand enough about psychology, let alone my own psychology. Came from a divorced family. I realized much later that a lot of that gave me psychological resilience in a way that, if you don't expect the day to be a good day all the time because you don't know what you're walking into as a teenager, that kind of preps you for what they're putting you through in the selection process. They're looking for people that can roll with the moment, be defeated, be tired, be set back, and then basically not let it get them down, and more so actually attack the next problem even more vigorously. So, and learn from whatever they can pull out of the loss. So those are the people that make it through. Those are the people that are trainable as SEALs or Green Berets or MARSOC Marines or Air Force Special Ops guys. That's the trainable raw material that everybody's looking for in the selection process of their various services.
And how many weeks do you have to go through in order to get that pin? Which I've only seen it in the movies. Yeah. So it's
right.
Yeah.
So traditionally, it's 26 weeks, 6 months. They've cut back a couple of weeks in the last few years and added a next phase after the traditional buds called SEAL Qualification Training, SQT. So they go through another 4 months after that. So now it's almost a continuous 10-month block from the day you start. And if you graduate at the end of that 10-month block, that's when they put the Budweiser or the SEAL, we call it the Budweiser, SEAL Trident on your chest. And then you is one, except you find out at your first SEAL command, you still don't know anything.
Oh, is that right? Okay. So then you go into the serious training after that. I mean, I don't know what it all entails, and don't tell me too much so you don't have to kill me.
Yeah, it's all serious training, but what happens is at each level, you graduate the BUDS process, then you get through SQT, you graduate that, then you get the Trident, so you feel like, okay, I'm a SEAL now. And then you go into a SEAL team, and these people have 5, 10, 15 years doing the job, and they've been all over the world, massive amounts of experience, and they're, you're like 2% of their capability and understanding and experience level. And it only takes you about a week to realize you're at the very bottom of the food chain. And the best thing for you to do is keep your mouth shut, your eyes and ears open, and learn from everybody or in any way you can. That's the only way you can make up the delta there.
Are you, how would I ask this question? Are you saying that after going through 10 months of serious high-level training, that you're not really qualified, that they have to put you under their wing, or do you just know enough to survive?
Well, you've got technical skills at a very basic level.
Okay.
So let me give you the difference in the extremes. You may have gone and landed on a pile of rocks at night with the Pacific Ocean throwing you up there, and maybe it's really cold because it's the winter. And you've gone through that traumatic experience that lasted 4 or 5 hours. And then maybe an SQT did something similar to that lasted a little bit longer. So you're a little bit more cold, maybe hypothermic. And then a year later, you're at a SEAL team and you're 300 miles north of the Arctic Circle on a mountaintop.
Jeez.
And it's a whole different level of cold and a whole different level of fatigue because you're out there for 4, 5, 6 days skiing with 110, 120 pound pack on your back. And in some cases, you're also towing a sled off of a hip belt. So every time you think it's bad, or every time you think it's bad enough and you've kind of arrived, somebody shows you a cliff in Greece with huge waves slapped against it. You're trying to come in on a rubber boat. So there's always something out there that humbles you
and challenges you going forward. How many years did you serve?
20.
Oh my word. Okay. I hope you have a nice pension or, or something for all of that time. All right, so let's fast forward to now becoming, you learned to lead at some point. At what juncture? 10 months, you clearly know 2% compared to the grizzled guys with the deep facial hair that we see in the movies that are out there. I think one of the more popular ones is this fellow named Jocko. I've seen he's got a podcast, and some of the others. What's the other guy that did 2 different trainings? You Can't Break Me.
Goggins?
Yes.
David Goggins. Yeah.
Yes. At what point did you feel in your journey that you had arrived?
Oh, wow.
When you became a mentor to the new guys that had just gone through Buds.
So I put it in 2 different categories. One would be leader, and the other one would be what we call operator. Operator is the term we use for somebody. And here's the common question, and it's the same thing in all special ops. Somebody brings up a name. What kind of guy is he? And you'll get, he's a good guy and he's a good operator. Well, he's okay, but he's a good operator. Or he's a great guy, but he's not a very good operator. You get a binary evaluation. So the operator part is really important. It means you're technically qualified, you're experienced, you've got lots and lots of supervisory credentials under your belt. You're jump master, fast rope master, dive supervisor, all these different things. So you've been running the evolutions. You've locked people out of submarines. You've jumped out, 18,000 feet. You've done all these different things in charge and technically executed what the task is. And I would say probably about 6 years in, I felt like I could do that. It didn't mean that I'd been a combat veteran yet or anything, but it meant that by rank, I was supposed to be mentoring. And by experience, everybody that was in my group, in my platoon, were different gradients less than me, except for the 2 or 3 people that were senior to me. And then in leadership, it was probably about 7 years. And that's when I had to start making decisions. We were a lot more disconnected in those days. We didn't have all the connectivity we have now. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have satellite navigation didn't exist. Satellite phones
AI.
didn't exist. Nothing like that. So what happens, they'd send you someplace to Europe, and you'd be on your own. I mean, you wouldn't even have access to a fax if you wanted to fax something back. So if you wanted to say something to anybody, you just had to pop a snail mail envelope in a post office box once you found out how the heck to use that country's mail system. And you may or may not get that letter back for another couple of months. So even phoning was very, very difficult. So they expected you to show a lot of autonomy and judgment and maturity. And it didn't matter how old you were. I was a pretty young guy. I was probably 22 when I became a leading petty officer of the platoon. So I was the 4th guy in charge of the platoon. And in that 7th year during that deployment, I had to become whatever they needed me to be as a leader. And that's when I really felt like I was learning. I was still making mistakes. I was asking for lots of advice, making fewer and fewer mistakes by the end of that year. And, that's kind of the leadership quandary. You're never the best you can be, but it's better than being what you were last year.
Right. Right.
So you're always kind of trying to evolve, get stronger, evade big catastrophes through your wisdom and your use of judgment. And in time, for me, probably by the time I was in for 13, 14 years, where I felt like I was a seasoned leader, like I could actually not relax, but I felt very comfortable in the role. And I had leaders working for me too. Leading leaders is a whole different game, as you know, than just leading operators or technical people. So yeah, so 6, 7 years for the leadership, 13 when I really felt like I was in a good place, probably 6 years for the operator role.
The reason I ask that is I believe you have to go through the pain of being a grunt, if you will, to get to where you've earned your stripes. The proverbial, I've earned my stripes. And I know that probably comes from the military. You've earned the stripes and earned your rank. I, for years, was a Taekwondo master. So I taught people to earn their black belts in Taekwondo. And when I wrapped a black belt on their waist after about 4 to 5 years of rigorous training to reach that point, I said, now you've just mastered the basics. The real learning begins. There was a reason for my question, because you just said it took about 7 years. And then after you teach, when someone arrives at a second degree black belt, then, okay, they're in their zone, because most people quit after they tick that box or they feel like they've arrived. But I guess the SEALs, how long is their commitment?
Listed is still 4 years. Very rarely does anybody get out before they hit 20 years, which is their first
Okay.
mark for retirement. Officers, so they can do 2 years and 2 years active, 2 years reserve, and then most of them stay in at least 4 years. And then they start having a decision point when they get to be a senior lieutenant, which is the equivalent of a captain in the Air Force or the Army, the Marine Corps. And because they know the next phase is there's more staff work, there's more desk time. You'll rotate into a combat leadership role eventually, but it's a different thing. Up until that point, those 4 years, you're like all enlisted SEALs. That's why the SEALs, the identification pin is gold for enlisted and officers. Because in the Navy, officers, if you're an aviation guy, the officers have gold, the enlisted have a kind of a pewter silver color. But SEALs all go through the same training. They go through the same thing. So
Got it.
back in the 60s, they said, we're going to give the same exact recognition to enlisted and officers.
Well, that's great. And what made you decide? I mean, you assumed and grew into leadership roles actively as a military man. You were enlisted at one point, and then you became an officer later, I presume.
Right.
And how did you
Right.
earn officer status? Did you have to go to college?
Yes. So in the U.S. military, to be a regular commissioned officer, you have to have a 4-year degree. There are other programs like limited duty officers and warrant officer programs, but the standard kind of commission deal, you have to have a 4-year degree. So I got my degree over time. I was up for senior chief, so I was up for the position, second to the highest level for enlisted rank when I was approved for officers candidate school. So I basically did 10 and 10. 10 as enlisted and 10 as an officer. And I basically did it not because I did it for the pay. There was a considerable pay jump. I had little kids, I had real little kids at the time, and I wasn't sure what the heck I could do if I got out of the Navy. So I decided this is the best way to stay in the Navy and, pay my bills. I was in San Diego at the time.
Oh, and that's an expensive city. Yeah.
Yeah. But for me, the cool thing was, remember the 4-year thing for officers? So I had just done 10. So I'm going to do another 4 years of operating as an officer. Like no staff work, no paperwork. So I ended up with 14 years of getting to play and getting to, learn and become better and better as an operator and a combat leader. Yeah, that's a lot of time.
So when did you decide? Was it the 20-year mark? You said, okay, I've had enough and now I want to make some real money, or I want to try the private sector, or you felt you had served your country long enough? What was that click?
So it was a combination of two things. I have 80% disability. I had a parachute accident, messed my back up. And I came back from a deployment as a task unit commander. And my next position was going to be my first staff position. And I was going to staff meetings, standing in for somebody else. And I got to see the environment. I got to see the conference table world. And, at this point I'd been 17 years, and I was lucky enough that 4 years for me got extended to about 6.5 to 7 years of operating and leading teams overseas. And it was so radically different than those 17 years to sit there in that room and have people haggling over supplies or haggling over whatever. And those two combination, I said, yeah, I've done my time. It's kind of like, you get older, it's like the NFL. If you don't realize and recognize it, somebody comes up to you and says, you're about half a step slower than you were last year.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit harder to get out of bed each day because you got all the broken bones and all the ortho catches up with you. And so you get to a point where you can't run as fast, jump as high. Your stamina and all that stuff isn't as good as the bulk of the operators who are in their like mid-20s. late 20s. Yeah. And they're polite about it. They'd run down the road past me. Morning, sir. You know,
And it's just an acceptance. It's so true. At some point, you got to pass the baton and
yeah.
move forward. All right. So then you transition after 20 years. You did your 20 years. You locked in your pension, and man, that's a long time. And then you went into the private sector. What skills were transferable into the private sector? Was it a wake-up call for you when people didn't just salute and move on and follow that, and they were picking their nails?
I was sensible enough by that time to have heard a lot of stories from people I knew that got out, that
Okay.
it wasn't an easy thing. I mean, when I was in the teams and I was younger, the only job anybody thought we could possibly do was a police officer because we were good with guns.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it wasn't a transferable. Now, our medics could get into the medical field, healthcare, but all the rest of us, that was all we had going for us. So, but by that time I had an MBA, and I said, all right, I think I'm going to find something where I can use that. And I found something where I could not even use that. By managing investments, I wasn't managing people. I wasn't managing departments and divisions in a corporation. That's what an MBA is for. And they don't teach you how to sell in an MBA program or
No,
in
they
the
do not.
undergrad. My undergrad was in business. Do not teach you how to sell. And the second you're out there, you find out that selling is the world. And it's the easiest thing to do as an entry level person. It's the hardest thing to learn as an entry level person if you've never been exposed to it. Didn't come up in a family business that, you were hawking the family's, products, whatever. So I struggled a lot. Academically, I passed all the licensing and all the things I had to do. And then I was told, okay, go out and find some new clients. And the way you did that was cold calling and cold walking and going to convention centers and setting up booths. And that was the conventional way to build a business. 5 people become 10 people, 10 people start referring, and it starts to blossom. But it takes a long time. And the firm I was with, they didn't pay a salary. You had a salary for the training period until you got your licensing, and then you had to live off of commissions and fees. So if you weren't out there, and it's Darwinian for a lot of reasons. I mean, you could do really good and then you rest on your laurels, and all of a sudden you start sinking back. And
What were you selling exactly, Marty?
Mutual funds. I was investing people's money in stocks, bonds. Eventually I started getting into foundations, trusts, different kinds of larger
So were you
structures.
Series 7? Did you have to get a Series 7
I was a
license?
Series 7, Series 6, 65. I had
63.
insurance license, disability, long-term disability insurance. I had a whole bunch of them.
Who were you?
And
Who were you under? What was your
I
band?
started with Legg Mason.
Not familiar.
And
Well, the reason I'm asking, because at 28, I worked for Merrill Lynch and went through their training program and had to do the same thing. So you're bringing back memories. That was another lifetime ago. But I
actually think Merrill Lynch probably did more sales training, and they're harsher. They're like the Marine Corps of financial services, I thought. In ours, it was more find your niche, do what you want to do. If you want to just do bonds, you want to just do stocks, you want to do international, go for it. And that's fine. I mean, I like autonomy. I was used to that. What I wasn't used to was not knowing how to do anything technically. So I sat around and moped for about 4 or 5 days after getting my license and calling about 300 or 400 people per day.
Yep.
Then I realized, there's a thing called a headset. So, I was getting like UFC jiu-jitsu ear.
Yep. Oh, I know it.
And,
I know it, bud. I did it. Smile and dial. Smile.
We call it dialing for dollars, punching plastic for money. It was all kinds of different things. But I got to a point where I just said, all right, if I don't start making some money, I'm gonna have a hard time paying my bills, and I got kids and stuff. And then I saw this magazine, this glossy magazine, and it was in the office, and it was like a success magazine where they touted all the heavy hitters, the big players. And they had it in almost every category on purpose. Every division was a different category of the services of the company. And you could go in and see people that were doing real estate investment trusts, people who are doing mutual funds, people that were doing UITs and all these other kinds of things. And I looked at it and I thought, well, hell, I'll just call those people. They're apparently successful. I'm
Got
going to
it.
do, and it sounds kind of like Napoleon Hill, but that's how I did in the teams. You go find the guy who's good at this, go find the guy that's been to that particular weird place in the world, and you sit down at their knee and you go, tell me everything you possibly tell me. Just vomit everything you know. I'll take notes. And so I started calling all these people up and I started getting really good advice about what not to do for sure. And then eventually what I did is I ended up taking some advice and I started doing seminars. And I had been a briefing officer for the admiral in charge of the SEALs. I was very comfortable in front of people. And I didn't have to learn anything. That's the first time anything connected from my prior life.
Bravo. That was what I was waiting for. That's the gem. You transferred skill sets that you learned from the military, being a leader, and then you found selling one to many at that point.
I mean, you got the discipline system of the military. You've got I show up early. I outwork everybody else, that kind of stuff. But I wasn't grinding my way to sales. It just wasn't happening until the seminar thing kicked in. And then I started to take off. So, and then within a year or two, I ended up getting picked up by UBS and then did fee-based portfolio management.
Nice. But then you got into some other lines of work. Where did that evolve?
Primarily because of 9/11. So when 9/11 happened, I was in a regional manager's office and the TV was between me and another guy. We couldn't see it, but he could see it. And everybody in that office had friends in New York from either prior jobs or with UBS. And the sound was off. So when the second plane hit, somebody came in the door and yelled what was going on. And we turned and started watching that. And, having been through enough of those drills, and some of them are drills and some of them are real, you go off and, get shot at, and sometimes you just load up in planes and sit there. But I knew what was going on at home, the SEAL teams. I knew everybody was getting their calls, and they're being told, get your butt in here and say your goodbyes, because I don't know if you're coming home tonight. And so I thought, okay, I'm done making money for rich people. I'm going to see if I can get into this somehow. And in a roundabout way, after I sold my book of business, that I was at the 8-year point in financial services, I connected with 2 or 3 different companies that needed counterterrorism expertise. Not the kinetic type, but the brain power type. What are the bad guys thinking? So I ended up being the counterterrorism profiling expert at the Athens Olympics in 2004.
Huh.
And I also did work for the same U.S. company that got that contract for a lot of the different infrastructure in the United States. And then I ended up in Baghdad for 7 months doing work like that. So it was completely different, obviously, from wearing a suit and looking at the market every day. But that did absolutely transfer my old skills, but mostly in the leadership area. I mean, in all those cases, because I'm talking to senior leaders and they're looking for some kind of risk mitigation. They're looking for this brass ring that's going to make it all better. And all I'm telling them is all the ways that somebody can attack you and defeat everything you've put in place. And they don't want to believe you, but then you have to basically lead through that moment, say, you can't just blow off the reality of this. And then you teach them things like defense in depth and security in depth and things that'll mitigate it even further. So it was a really good experience.
How did they find you?
It was weird. I ended up doing I did a speech, unpaid, because I didn't realize I could charge for it. And there was a guy in the audience who came up to me and asked if I had a card, and he was with a think tank in near Aberdeen Proving Ground up in Maryland. And they were just given some kind of counterterrorism thing to do, a contract from the Pentagon. And so he asked if I could come in and be kind of an expert on the asymmetrical aspect of it. Because everybody had in this think tank were all infantry and kind of straightforward, conventional military types, and he didn't have any special ops guys. So I went in there and started looking at all the things they were supposed to talk about and discuss and write up, and had a lot of fun. And then they referred me to another large company, SAIC, and SAIC called me about the Athens thing, and then that kind of boomeranged around for a couple of years. And but eventually I settled out in a large defense company, and I was back to leading first a little tiny group, and then a division, and then a whole subsidiary company.
And now you've written a book.
I've published 10 novels.
Yes. Yeah.
And 3 business books. Yes. The last one of which was real recent, called Be Different.
Do you have a copy handy?
I don't.
Okay.
I'm
well,
actually,
tell us where
I'm
they
actually,
can get it.
I'm actually packing out to move to Florida as we sit here.
Oh, okay. Well, then that'll explain. But tell us
Yeah.
about the book so the listeners will know where to get it, the title.
Sure. Yeah. Well, all my books, you just go to martystrong.com. You'll find access and links to Amazon and everybody else. So my first book, Be Nimble, was about leadership and scaling and the crisis around those kind of dynamics. The second book was Be Visionary. So it was about how to develop a vision and convert the vision into a working concept, and then eventually an operational strategy. And the third book, Be Different, is all about creativity and imagination and innovation. And it was inspired because I've been on several boards, a lot of technical boards, which are kind of strange. I'm not a real techie guy,
Mm.
but again, it's that asymmetrical thing. You come in and you're the one person, the weird person in the room that doesn't know why, or ask the dumb questions like, why is it red? Or why does it have 3 legs instead of 4? And everybody kind of looks at you, and then, what do you mean? And then they'll realize, well, hey, he's right. Because you don't know. You're just throwing something out there. So I was on a board that did robotics events for kids, which then connected me with a bunch of brain scientists and educators that were working on how to spark creativity in kids and in young adults. And I went a step further. I started talking to people and realized through brain science and through a lot of studies have been done that the assessment test for creativity that were being given to 6-year-olds that showed like a high, mid 90 percentile capability to be creative. By the time these same research studies got to people in their 40s, it was like 2 to 3%.
Mm.
And the reason for that wasn't chemical, it wasn't biological, it wasn't anything that people might think. You don't suddenly become non-creative after puberty. It was the institutional impact on our brain's natural desire and mechanical ability to be creative. So you've got 2 sides of your brain, and not left and right, but there's 2 little switches they discovered. And one is a focus, task-oriented switch, and the other one is, they call it the forager or the explorer switch. And ancient humans used both of them to their advantage. When they found a safe place, they were exploring and looking, they had lots of food and water and everything, they'd hunker down and they'd focus on building a life there until they ran out of food. And then they had to go to the explorer switch and start risk taking. They had to go over the next hill, the next mountain. And then once they found a place, they'd switch back to task focus. And what we've basically done in modern society is we've just focused everything, shifted everything over, and only rewarded the task focus side of the brain. It doesn't mean the other side isn't active or able to be
Switched
turned on.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, being told to comply, obey rules, regulations, restrictions intellectually, ever since you're probably 7 or 8 years old, you can't be a lead guitar player in a band. That's not for you. Just do your studies. There's only one way to get to the answer to that division problem. I don't care what your grandfather showed you. Yeah, their answer is the right one, but you didn't get there the way we're telling you to get there. You know what I'm talking about. And then you eventually get to college, and it's the same thing. College is just a huge history lesson because everything they're teaching is books about what has been in every single category. Then you get to your workplace, and if you have the audacity to raise your hand because you have an idea, everybody looks at you like you have 3 heads because you haven't spent the time, you don't have the tenure, you don't know what you're talking about. And because you're new, how could you possibly have anything to offer? You have to wait until you're like us in 5 or 6 years, and then you can raise your hand to tell us what we all know you're going to say because we've all decided what the answer is. So that's what the book's about. It's basically recognizing these things, and then how do you shake your way out of it? Then how do you use it to be happier and to build things, whether it's businesses or life.
Do you believe a fresh perspective is good? Let's say somebody comes in with no knowledge about how things have been historically, or in a business environment, or possibly military, but comes in with virgin eyes and may look at things through a completely different lens. Do you think there's value in that, or should they wait until they have earned their status?
I absolutely think there's value in that. I think it's myopic and self-destructive for organizations to not tap into that. Now it's hard to do it, right? It's hard to say, throw out everything you think, everything comes to your head, whatever, and we may not use 95% of it. And do it in a way that they don't become depressed or resentful because you're not taking anything on. But in the SEAL teams, when I first came in, the Vietnam era guys, we'd get a job, we'd look at it, and everybody would throw their thoughts out. Everybody, the most junior person had never been shot at, who just got off the bus, could come up with the idea. And if that idea made sense to everybody, we went with that idea.
Oh, okay.
So everybody had, and you knew that you probably weren't going to come up with the idea very often, but you also knew there was nothing wrong with saying it. And it was the one time where they didn't crap all over the new guys.
So it's classic brainstorming. It's classic brainstorming then.
Because that's how they beat the Viet Cong over and over. As the Viet Cong adapted to them, they would change what they were doing based on this constant learning process. And anyway, that's like I've been on. Nice thing about being on a board, if you're the oddball, they're going to defer to you out of grace and professionalism. So at least you get to say something. I'm not going to tell you to put your hand down. But I'll tell you, I've been on a board with nothing but engineers, and they've been doing something for 20-something years. And when I ask them, what is the secret sauce? What is it that makes you different? What differentiates you from another group doing the same thing? And I get them all staring at me, and I say, well, maybe we should find that, put it in a bottle, right? And so then I go out to a bunch of these events, and I see it, and I come back and I lay it out, and they're all looking at me, and they, wow, he's right. After 20-something years, none of us articulated what is really special about what we do, because we're focusing on it as engineers only.
Right. Yeah, they have a different mindset. The one engineer, the most famous engineer, is probably Elon Musk. And he was asked the question, what curriculum would be beneficial for someone going to college? And he said, engineering, because that's a different type of thinking. Now, he's an entrepreneurial engineer to the nth degree, obviously. And he's addressed that, I think, pretty well. Yeah, I've read 4 books on him. Walter Isaacson's book, Elon, is a fantastic book. And he's got a personality where he's steadfast as far as his engineering instincts until he proves himself wrong or somebody else proves him wrong. He'll be adamantly, opposed to any change once he locks on it till somebody proves him wrong. And then he'll switch on a dime. It's just boom, right? So he's open-minded. At the same time, he's I guess bombastic and very irritatingly focused, which intimidates a lot of people, right? I mean, Steve Jobs did the same thing. Engineers ran away from him. But the ones that didn't run away from him ended up being the guys that created all the devices we're using today. Because you have to be challenged, and you have to have, debate that, sure, there's friction and tension, but there's also traction when you have that kind of discourse. So friction plus traction. Yeah. Opens the door to a successful strategic change. Yeah. Friction and traction, friction and tension can equal traction. Friction and tension can equal traction, and traction. Don't be afraid. Conflict avoidance means you're not going to get the traction. Conflict avoidance means you're never going to get the good stuff. That is our nugget today. That is a really good nugget of differentiation. Is what is the key to making change when you've got all these smart people? And I think you've ID'd it nicely there, Marty. So where can people get in touch with you? MartyStrong.com? MartyStrong.com. You go there, and all my public speaking programs, my books, everything, all available there. Great. Well, Marty, you've been a great guest today, and thank you for that big nugget. And that came towards the end of our interview today. And I'd love to have you back at some point in the future once you get settled into Florida. I don't know, you're leaving Virginia Beach, I think it is. Isn't that where you are? What
Yes.
city in Florida you're going to?
Near West Palm Beach.
Okay. Okay. Well, you're on the Atlantic side, and let's see how you contend with mosquitoes. But that's that's always that's why I left Bali. I lived in Bali for a while, and one day I woke up one night after sitting out for dinner. I'd been there in month 8, and my legs from the knees down were covered with at least 100 bites. I said, I'm done. Packed up in the morning, left my villa, and moved back to Thailand. Just wasn't willing to endure that pain anymore, or discomfort, I should say. It was enough. Well, Marty, you've been great. Thank you so much for being an amazing authority on the Amazing Authorities podcast, and we'll have you back again in the future.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Amazing Authorities podcast. If today's episode inspired you, take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps more experts like you rise to the top. For behind-the-scenes access and free resources to boost your authority, head to MitchCarson.com. Until next time, stay amazing.